Hello friends, in this project I'm going to repaint this Bobblehead Chihuahua to be my dog Moose. This is a gift from my dad. I'm using one of these throwback flock types of Bobblehead because I prefer them and because my dad has a couple of classic cars that I can imagine this winding up in. Otherwise it'll probably just stay on his desk in his auto tech shop. I could have sculpted my own, as I could with all of my customs, or have gone with a resin one, but I kind of want for it to be flocked at the end, and I don't want to personally deal with the flocking. So I'm going to paint it in the same way that I did my Mothman Calico Critters, which is using fabric dye. I gave the Bobblehead a gentle wash with a toothbrush and some soap to make sure that the base is clean. Moose has specific markings, which I think is called phantom, or probably point. His main fur color is dark brown, and I think the brown might be considered red. I don't know, he's a Pikachu anyway. I'm giving lots of room in my sketch with watercolored pencils for the markings because I can paint more of the dark brown, but I won't be able to get more tan. To make sure I'm being precise, I'm using cotton swabs to paint on the dye. The dye, by the way, is a mix of Jacquard Eye Dye Black and Rit Dye More Chocolate. I tried to get a color close to his coat, which is much darker than the chocolate color, but it isn't black. I'm also painting it on cold, and I leave it to dry with a bunch of spare silica packets so that it dries quickly and completely. Unfortunately, the dye bled way more than I was anticipating. Even gravity was affecting the way the dye moved. So now most of the markings that I planned are covered up with the dye. So I'm going to have to fix his markings. Except I don't, because I anticipated this kind of thing happening and bought two at the same time. So I'll just restart on a completely new base. And this time, I'm going to try and quote-unquote mask the tan patterns that I need with some watered-down glue. This is going to stiffen the feel of the flocking, but that's alright because this flocking wasn't very soft to begin with. That masking thing didn't work as well as I thought it would because the dye was still kind of able to get in those areas. But that's okay because I'm going to use a proper paintbrush to paint on the dye, which is a slightly darker mix than the last one. Knowing that gravity alongside the capillary effect will make the dye move, I'm going even slower this time. I'm able to kind of push the dye a little bit on the base, so I'm using that just so that there isn't too much dye on the base. I'm being really careful around the face. so it came out pretty okay. I would like to do some fixes on the dye of the face, but I'd actually have to mix up more of that color if I'm going to do that. So I'm probably going to wind up doing that with paint instead. Or actually the dye isn't set at all, so I can wet it just a tiny bit with water and move the dye to where it needs to be, and that's going to work out. I debated doing this for a while, but I really do think that I'm going to adjust the shape of the eyes. I'm going to take the eye pegs out of the failed one's head so that I have the good one complete if these mods don't turn out nice. I'm going to use Super Sculpey to add on to the eye pegs, or well, one eye peg and one nose peg, and then sand them down to look right. I also didn't have anything to make a collar for him to cover up the remnants of the original base's collar, so I'll make that out of Sculpey as well. I wouldn't suggest it as a full cure, but I did set them with some hot water just so they wouldn't get squashed. Boiling water works better, but I wanted a quick fix, and that isn't a full cure either anyway. Once they're cured and cooled and sanded smooth, I'll start painting them with acrylics. The color is pretty simple since details on that are kind of arbitrary. But for the eye, I really want to capture how interesting Moose's eyes actually look. I'm going to paint them in olivey greens and browns to try to get it looking right. Of course, their actual color changes a little depending on the lighting. But I'm fairly happy with the paint job on them. I'll wrap them up with the pupil and some catch lights, and I'm just putting them in the head for a second just so that they aren't incredibly wonky looking. I'll seal them up with a few layers of Salon Perfect Plumping nail polish so that they're ultra glossy. The collar gets an outline in black and straight Duraclear matte varnish. To attach them to the bobblehead, I'm going to use this JB Welder Plastic Bonder epoxy glue. Hot glue wouldn't melt if this does get left in a car, and I don't want that to happen. I did mask off places where I was worried it might get on, so the collar was attached really nicely. There was a little bit of spillage right near his eyes, and this doesn't dry clear. I went over it with acrylic paint like I mentioned before. To be honest, the eyes look a little weird. I trimmed them a tiny bit with a razor before, but they didn't turn out straight. To make it look better, I'm going to paint on some eyelids in matte black to give them a clean, straight border. This is probably the best I'm going to be able to make them, and they look a little weird until I take off all of the masks. So this is how he turned out. The fur is a little bit too dark in my opinion, and the eyes look kind of weird, but it's whatever. I think it came out successful.